Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today, we have a powerful story that will leave you speechless. Imagine this: a regular morning at a busy bank, customers waiting in long lines, when an elderly woman is humiliated by a rude teller just because she doesn't use a smartphone. But what happens when a billionaire walks in and witnesses the injustice? Justice is served in the most unexpected way. Stay with us until the end, because this story is one you won't forget. And remember, while this is a fictional tale, it's meant to entertain and inspire us all. Let's get started. It was a cold Monday morning in downtown Los Angeles, the kind of chill that made you pull your coat tighter as you stepped out the door. The streets were buzzing with the usual hustle and bustle of the city, but inside the Citizens First Bank, the atmosphere was tense. Customers were standing in long lines, their faces a mix of impatience and frustration as they waited for their turn at the counter. Among them was Mrs. Josephine Collins, a sweet, elderly woman in her late 70s, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her purse. Her wrinkled face told the story of a life well lived, yet today, she felt a sense of unease. She'd come to withdraw some money, but something about today felt different. She approached the counter, her glasses perched on the end of her nose, struggling to see the teller in front of her. Jacob, a young teller with a sharp, impatient glare, barely looked up from his screen as she spoke. "Excuse me, young man. I'd like to withdraw some money, please." Jacob sighed loudly, as though her request was an inconvenience. "Ma'am, I already told you, we can't process withdrawals over $1,000 unless you use the app," he said, his tone dismissive. Mrs. Collins adjusted her glasses, her voice soft yet firm. "I don't have an app, young man. I've been banking here for 30 years. Please, just let me withdraw my money." But Jacob wasn't having it. He shook his head and sighed again, clearly annoyed. "You need to keep up with the times, ma'am. We can't just hand out money like it's candy. Come back with someone younger who can help you." The people in line behind her started to murmur, some shaking their heads in disapproval, others laughing under their breath. Mrs. Collins felt her heart drop as she stepped aside, feeling smaller than ever before. Mrs. Collins stood there, gripping her purse a little tighter, her face growing hot with embarrassment. "Please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need this money for my medication. I don't have anyone to help me with apps or online banking." Her plea hung in the air, but Jacob simply rolled his eyes. "If you can't figure out something as simple as an app, maybe you shouldn't be managing money on your own," he said, his tone laced with condescension. A few chuckles came from the line behind her, while others just shook their heads, too wrapped up in their own impatience to care. Mrs. Collins felt a lump form in her throat. Her late husband had always handled the banking, and now, standing here alone, she felt powerless. Jacob exhaled sharply and waved his hand dismissively. "Next," he called out, already looking past her as if she didn't exist. Tears welled up in her eyes as she stepped back, her legs feeling weak. Just then, a burly security guard in a navy blue uniform stepped forward. "Ma'am, you're holding up the line," he said, his voice flat and uninterested. He gestured toward the door. "If you don't have the app, there's nothing we can do for you. You need to leave." Mrs. Collins swallowed hard, her vision blurring as she turned toward the exit. The weight of humiliation pressed down on her, heavier than she'd ever felt before. Just as Mrs. Collins turned to leave, a deep, commanding voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Is this how you treat loyal customers?" The entire bank fell silent. Heads turned toward the entrance, and there, standing tall in a dark suit, was none other than Elon Musk. His piercing gaze locked onto Jacob, and in an instant, the smug expression on the young teller's face disappeared. The bank manager, Mr. Randall, nearly tripped over his own feet as he rushed out of his office. His face was pale, his hands nervously smoothing his tie. "Mr. Musk, this is an unexpected honor," he stammered. How can we assist you today?" Elon didn't even acknowledge him. Instead, he walked straight toward Mrs. Collins, his expression softening. "Ma'am, what's the problem?" he asked. Mrs. Collins hesitated for a moment, still shaken. "I just wanted to withdraw some money," she said quietly. "But they told me I need an app. I don't know how to use those things." Elon's eyes narrowed as he turned sharply to Jacob. "So you think it's acceptable to humiliate an elderly woman just because she doesn't use a smartphone?" Jacob stammered, his confidence crumbling. I was just following policy." Elon pulled out his phone. "Let's test that. What's the highest amount someone can withdraw without an app?" Mr. Randall's throat went dry. Well?" He hesitated, then finally admitted. $11,000, sir." Elon raised an eyebrow. "Then why didn't she get it?" Jacob looked down, unable to answer. The silence in the bank was deafening. Elon's gaze remained locked on Jacob, his expression unreadable but firm. "So let me get this straight," he said slowly. "This woman has been banking here for decades, and instead of helping her, you humiliate her in front of everyone?" Jacob swallowed hard, shifting uncomfortably. I didn't mean—" "You didn't mean to disrespect her?" Elon interrupted. "Because that's exactly what you did. You treated her like an inconvenience when she's the reason places like this even exist. If this is how you handle customers, you're in the wrong job." Mr. Randall, sensing disaster, stepped forward quickly. "Mr. Musk, I assure you this is not how we typically—" "Save it," Elon cut him off. "Right now, you're going to personally assist Mrs. Collins and ensure she gets whatever amount she came for. No more excuses." Mr. Randall nodded so fast it looked like his head might fall off. "Of course, sir. Right this way, ma'am," he said, gently guiding Mrs. Collins to a private counter, where he himself processed her withdrawal. Her hands still trembled, but now it was from relief rather than humiliation. Elon turned back to Jacob, his voice ice cold. "As for you, you're fired. Effective immediately." A gasp rippled through the room. Jacob's face turned ghostly white. "But please, sir, I need this job," he sputtered. Elon didn't even blink. "Then find one where you don't have to interact with people." Jacob opened his mouth to argue, but no words came. He grabbed his things and slinked out of the bank, his once arrogant demeanor completely shattered. The entire room remained silent, watching justice unfold right before their eyes. At the special counter, Mr. Randall personally counted out the cash, his hands shaking more than Mrs. Collins. "Here you go, ma'am," he said with forced politeness, sliding the neatly stacked bills toward her. "I sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding." Mrs. Collins picked up the money, her fingers trembling as she tucked it carefully into her purse. She let out a shaky breath, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. Just minutes ago, she had felt powerless, like she didn't belong in this world anymore. But now she stood tall, her dignity restored. Turning to Elon, she blinked back tears. "Thank you, Mr. Musk. I don't know what I would have done without you." Elon gave her a small, reassuring smile. "No need to thank me," he said. "Just promise me one thing." She tilted her head, curious. "What's that?" "Enjoy your day," he said simply. "You've earned it." The entire bank remained frozen, every employee and customer watching in stunned silence. No one dared to speak. No one dared to move. The arrogance that had filled the room earlier was gone, replaced with a heavy sense of respect, and for some, shame. Justice had been served, swiftly and sharply. And as Elon Musk walked out the door, it was clear to everyone that this was a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. This story reminds us of a simple but powerful truth. Always treat others with respect, especially those who came before us. The way we treat the elderly, the vulnerable, and the people who paved the way for us says a lot about who we are. But what do you think? Did Elon do the right thing? Have you ever witnessed something like this in real life? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating stories like this one. And stay tuned. Our next video will leave you just as surprised. See you soon.